I've heard it said that when Indigenous elders begin to tell a story that will impart some wisdom to the people, they sometimes say, I don't know if this actually happened this way, but it's true. And I don't actually know if they do that, but I think it is true. And I think sometimes we give the wisdom of Indigenous elders considerable respect, which is absolutely appropriate, I think, because we somehow sometimes intuit that they may have a better grasp on how the world works than the rest of us do, and we can learn a lot from them. So I'm going to go way out on a limb here for a Christian minister on Easter morning and say of the resurrection, I don't know how this actually happened, but I know it's true. I am confident that death is a part of life, but not the end of it. Now, a couple of days ago on Good Friday, we were pretty focused on death, the horrific, grotesque death of Jesus on the cross. And there's a reason that we begin our Easter services kind of the way we ended our Good Friday services, in shadows and solemnly. You know, it almost seems gauche to look back at the crucifixion when we've finally gotten through that. And here we are, finally on Easter morning, celebrating the resurrection. And I've heard people say, oh, I don't go to Good Friday services. I worship a God of life, not a God of death, and ours is an Easter faith. Some folks can accept the power of God expressed in the power of resurrection, but can't accept the vulnerability of God in the crucifixion. But I'm here to tell you that not only is death a part of life, it's not the end of it. And also God is a God of both death and life. God is with us in life and in death and in resurrection. They say that nothing's inevitable but death and taxes. And they seem to be, but they're not all. Grief and pain are inevitable. Grief and pain felt by the women who went to the tomb on that first Easter morning was the same grief and pain that we too often know. And we know it because it is an inevitable part of the human condition. But we gather as people of faith on Easter morning to proclaim that that is not all there is, that life is beautiful even when it's hard. Life is valuable, which is why we fight so hard for it. And life is an incredible gift from God, new every morning. There's a poem by the Guatemalan poet Julia Esquivel from her book, Threatened with Resurrection, because resurrection and transformation can be a scary thing. Can I get an amen? Amen. And it's something that she wrote out of her experience living among the oppressed and war-torn and marginalized people of Central America. And it's called, I Am Not Afraid of Death. And part of it goes like this. I am no longer afraid of death. I know well its dark and cold corridors leading to life. I'm afraid rather of that life which does not come out of death, which cramps our hands and slows our march. I'm afraid of my fear, and even more afraid of the fear of others who do not know where they are going, who continue clinging to what they think is life, which we know to be death. I live each day to kill death. I die each day to give birth to life. And so as people of faith, we give birth to life, even in the face of death. Now this morning, we're actually concluding our Lenten sermon series on faith in the future. And because Easter is a season, not just one day, we're starting a new series, which for lack of a better idea, we're calling Emerge. Because we've been through a lot in the past few years and months and days. That'd be a good place for another amen. Amen. It's true, isn't it? And I think some of us are finally beginning to feel like we're emerging from the pandemic that's kept us down for 3 years. And I think as a church, we too may feel like we're emerging from a time of confusion and change and beginning to look again at our future. Now, I didn't realize it. June kind of stole some of my sermon here. It's okay, honey. It's okay. I'm going to steal some of yours. Fair enough? Okay. There's a metaphor that preachers often use when we speak of resurrection. And honestly, I always thought it was kind of trite, and I never used it until today, when it seems perfectly apt. In a time when we are emerging from a problematic past, we might do well to consider the butterfly. And you know the story of the butterfly. What's your name over there? You knew what happens. Yeah. The butterfly starts out as a caterpillar, a little worm-like thing. And then at some point, the caterpillar just knows the time is right. And I have no idea how a caterpillar knows this. It's working with a brain the size of a grain of salt. But somehow it knows. And it begins to make a cocoon. And it goes into that cocoon to await its next stage. Only, and this is the gross part, while it's in the cocoon, it basically dies. It dissolves into this sticky, gooey, shapeless mass of gunk. And the gunk waits there in the dark. And somehow, again, when the time is right, and I have no idea how the gunk knows anything, the gunk begins to form a body with legs and a head and an itty-bitty little brain and wings. It never had wings before, but now it has wings. Wings so that it can fly. And then from the cocoon, a beautiful butterfly emerges. And I kind of think that the caterpillar's instinct about cocooning, entering the nurturing dark of gestation, is paralleled in the story of creation, when it is written that the earth was formless and void, a pile of gunk, if you will. And the Spirit of God moved over the gunk, and behold the earth. I think that's what it says in Genesis. I'm not sure what the Hebrew for gunk is, but the caterpillar's instinct about cocooning and entering into the nurturing dark of gestation is also paralleled in the story of Jesus. From his birth out of the womb of Mary and emerging into life, and again in the dark of his burial tomb from which he emerged triumphant over death to live again a new life, a resurrected life. And once again, I don't know how it happened, but I know it's true. And finally, the story of the caterpillar is paralleled in our own lives and in our own willingness for transformation. And emerging is inherent in the Christian story and in our story as followers of Jesus. But it also means that we need to trust in the divine when we aren't sure what's next for us. I'm pretty sure the caterpillar has no idea what's next while it waits in the dark and the goo. And I'm really sure the goo has no idea. And frankly, we also never know what's next. But that is when transformation happens. Now, very early this morning, very, very early this morning, about 30 folks gathered down at Ashbridges Bay and walked out to the point to see the sunrise and celebrate the Easter morn. And I'm happy to report that the sun came up right on time at the end of our service, and it was so freaking beautiful. And Reverend June gave the homily, and she said something really profound, and I'm going to blatantly steal it because it was that good. Thank you, June. See, June, I was awake and even paying attention. Amazing, eh? Anyhow, she quoted the scientist and mystic Pierre Teilhard de Chardin. And I think de Chardin is probably best known for his saying, we are not human beings having a spiritual experience, we are spiritual beings having a human experience. Amen? But he was first and foremost a scientist, a geologist and paleontologist. He loved rocks and fossils, which is something he and I have in common. But as much as he was a scientist studying the origins of the earth and life upon it, he was also a mystic and a priest. And in reflecting on the phenomenon of humanity and of life on earth, he said, "Nothing is so delicate and fugitive by its very nature as a beginning. Beginnings have an irritating but essential fragility, and one that should be taken to heart. It's the same in every domain. When anything really new begins to germinate around us, we cannot distinguish it for the very good reason that it could only be recognized in the light of what it is going to be." Like Billy sang this morning, our souls will look back and wonder how I got through. Amen? Well, MCC Toronto, we are at a place of new beginnings. And God only knows, I mean, seriously, God only knows what is in store for us. As the Apostle Paul wrote in the letter to the Corinthians, "Eye has not seen, nor ear heard, nor have entered into the human heart the things which God has prepared for those who love God." In other words, the best is yet to come. Something is about to emerge. So will we allow ourselves to trust in the dark where transformation begins? Dark like before the dawn of creation, dark like a womb bearing life. So in this Easter season, in the spring of the year, as we follow in faith the path that takes us from life and through death and beyond, may we emerge once more into new life. Amen.